Yep. Ready? Yes. So welcome everyone. It is lovely to see you all. It's always a great pleasure to welcome Iselin Frydenlund to CASR. And as you know, Iselin is a professor of the study of religion here at MF, and she's also a former director of MF CASR. Yes. So today she will talk with us about revolution or order, Buddhist responses to the 2021 failed military coup in Myanmar. And yeah, let me just say it, you know this, 13 minutes for talking, 13 minutes for discussion. And then you can either walk up to the microphone and pose a question there, or you can put your question in the chat function. Easily.
All right, thanks a lot for the invitation. Very happy to see you all here. It's a bleak topic, so just be prepared. All possible trigger warnings for this. Yeah, this talk is based on a co-written article with my good friend and colleague Pyo Wei, who is now in Thailand. He's a Burmese scholar. So I'm presenting on behalf of both of us and in kind of honor of all the brave people that we work with. And a lengthy version of this talk will be published in a couple of weeks, I believe, in Journal of Contemporary Asia in a special issue on the Myanmar Spring Revolution. As the military crackdown on popular anti-coup protests turned ever more brutal in March 2021 onwards, people in Myanmar made a shift in the ways that they conceptualize their fight against the military, from resistance to revolution. This shift calls for nuanced understanding of its implications and subsequently a need for theorizing the notion of revolution. In Burmese, Tolanye. In our work, we take seriously the various ways in which our Myanmar colleagues and interlocutors cast their struggle as revolutionary. Revolutionary projects, by definition, aim to create new forms of politics and political relationships. As Justin Chambers and Nick Cheeseman, the editors of the special issue, point out, the situation in Myanmar, like in Egypt in 2011, can best be understood as a revolutionary situation, which was not planned for and one with an uncertain outcome. The lack of pre-planning is crucial here, as it means that we cannot take pre-coup political imaginaries as necessarily operable or relevant for the revolutionary situation. It is crucial that in the revolutionary situation, new visions across class and ethnicity are in the making, which importantly go well beyond that of the National League for Democracy of the pre-coup period. In fact, people insist that the true revolution contests demands for a mere return to past models of democracy. What is at stake is a total and radical transformation of the world. For long, revolutions have been the subject of political theory, focusing on acts of political rupture. Recently, anthropologists have made useful interventions in the study of revolutions, calling for a holistic and ethnographic approach to revolution, seeing them, in the words of Sherchich, Holbrad, and Tasse, which is the sort of, they provide the theoretical framework for our article. They see revolutions as attempts to radically reconstitute the world's people inhabit. This perspective, they argue, make revolutions more than simply acts of violent political rupture, calling for understanding revolutions as being deeply cosmogonic. We find their conceptual framework particularly useful for our study of the Myanmar Spring Revolution, as it allows for exploration of what they call cosmological coordinates that frame the ways in which the revolution is articulated, but also that it allows us to understand revolutions as cosmological projects in their own right. This double analytical strategy of both understanding the worldviews that frame revolutions, but also how revolutionary projects might simultaneously break down such frameworks, is particularly useful lens to think with of the changing roles of Buddhism in the Myanmar revolution, in addition to shedding lights upon why certain sections of the Buddhist monastic order, the Sangha, explicitly resist the revolution. Not surprisingly, revolutionary visions inherently pose serious threat to institutionalized religion, such as the Sangha. From a Buddhist normative point of view, the question inevitably arises about the extent to which a revolution constitutes a threat to the Buddha Sasana, which is the emic term for the Buddhist religion in Pali. How do monks and nuns in Myanmar, approximately close to 600,000 individuals, relate to the groundbreaking work at stake? Are they imagining the political order differently today from the past? How do they envision the role of Buddhism in a future democratic Myanmar? Furthermore, the revolutionary agenda begs the question as to what extent there is a difference to the ways that lay people think about revolution in a strict political sense as a change of government and radical social change from the ways in which Buddhist monks and nuns theorize revolution. If it is true that what distinguishes the post-2021 coup political struggle from previous struggles in Burma is a shift from a Buddhist political paradigm to a notion of the sovereignty of the people, then what is the role of Buddhist political paradigms or of institutional Buddhism in making new political orders? Ignoring the role of the Sangha, we argue in the paper, runs the risk of overlooking important dynamics in both justifying and resisting the military junta. In the paper, we ask two interrelated questions. First, we seek to understand the ways in which senior leading monks have been supporting the military coup, following what we define as a Buddhist ideology of order. Second, we analyze the role of Buddhist revolutionary politics, asking what does revolution mean from a Buddhist point of view? Can we speak of a Buddhist revolution? And if so, does that entail a radical transformation of Buddhism itself? From what we can read out of social media posts and online sermons, leading monks accept the notion of the military as the only possible protector of Buddhism against what they see as dangerous anti-Buddhist terrorist activities, which for them can only result in anarchy and destruction. Thus, Buddhist monastics supportive of the military show strong commitments to the Buddhist ideology of order, for which they have received massive lay critique. The roots of the Buddhist ideology of order can be traced to two distinct but interrelated strands of thought. The first strand is rooted in Buddhism itself, for example, in fears of chaos and anarchy, such as depicted in canonical texts, such as the Aganya Sutta. The second strand is linked to the post-1988 military ideology of law and order. The political concept of law and order corresponds to the absence of anarchy, the latter understood as a condition of being kingless. Looking back to the post-1988 years, which was a watershed in post-colonial Burma, we see that the military increasingly justified its rule with reference to Buddhism, and that during the years of semi-civilian rule, the military held its protecting wings over Buddhist nationalist groups. Following this, the pro-democracy opposition has increasingly been identified as anti-Buddhist. After the coup, this discursive shift has become ever more prominent, and what was before called public enemies and threats to the nation are now increasingly portrayed as enemies of Buddhism. For example, generals refer to the famous Sitago Sayadaw, he's a very famous monk, and he gave a very infamous 2017 military sermon where he used the Sri Lankan chronicle, the Mahavamsa, to justify the killings of Rohingyas. The army now uses Sitago's interpretation of the Mahavamsa as justification for military action against armed resistance groups. The Mahavamsa justifies violence against non-Buddhists in order to protect Buddhism in times of peril, but the extension to groups belonging to the Buddhist majority indicates, we argue, a noteworthy shift in the anarchy narrative. The enemy is now no longer racialized non-Buddhist others, but defined internal enemies of Buddhism. This discursive shift implies dehumanization of the internal enemy, thus laying the ground for acts of violence against fellow Buddhist citizens. On the opposite side of the pro-military monks, we find monks who strongly identify with the revolution. In Myanmar, the term revolution Taulanye is polysemantic, connoting notions of radical change as well as resistance. The concept plays an obvious role in Burmese communist traditions, but is now widely used as resistance to the military, including a vision of broader societal change that transcends mere resistance. To King Zero, one of the most famous revolutionary monks, being a revolutionary is to restore the Dhamma, the teachings, and the two cannot be separated. Decline in Dhamma is what caused the suffering of the people in the first place. In his view, a future Dhamma state after the revolution, when it has succeeded, must be a religiously inclusive state in which followers of different faiths can coexist peacefully. A Dhamma state is not about creating a religious state based on exclusion of minorities, but one built on respect, peace, and justice, transcending religious and ethnic difference. Liberation is often used in Buddhist sermons. But in a revolutionary situation, we find that revolutionary monks would use the term liberation, lutlat lie, in a wider sense, so to include spiritual as well as physical liberation in the here and now. These sermons often contain encouragement for individual sacrifice and continued resistance. In these settings, the revolutionary coordinates are clearly Buddhist, and there is a conflation of individual liberation with liberation of the people from tyranny. A comparative perspective, coming to a kind of conclusion here, a comparative perspective on Buddhism and revolutionary politics shows that more often than not, Buddhism has been on the losing side of revolutionary projects. Understanding the role of Buddhism in post-coup Myanmar, we argue that the Myanmar Spring Revolution calls for different theorizing of the relationship between religion and revolution altogether, calling for attention to the ways in which religion is neither the state lawyer suppressor of revolts in failed uprisings, nor the victim of anti-religious revolutionary politics like in Mongolia and Cambodia. Rather, Buddhism finds itself at multiple sides of the revolutionary situation. On the one side, we see military monks justify continued military rule and bless nationalist paramilitary groups, while on the other side, revolutionary monks support the armed resistance against military rule. What we see then is division and polarization among the Sangha. Revolutionary monks understand the revolution according to Buddhist coordinates, for example, in their visions of a Dhamma state, which tap into traditional Buddhist utopias of the righteous state. Importantly, however, the context of the vision of a Dhamma state is different now from previous utopian imaginaries. For example, if we look at King Zero's vision of a Dhamma state after the revolution, this Dhamma state is not seen in relation to a Dhammaraja, the righteous Buddhist king, but rather as a democratic vision of a just society. In the revolutionary context, a Dhamma state is not about state protection of Buddhism or desires for a Buddhist king. More than anything, it refers to visions of social justice and sovereignty of the people. As such, the revolutionary monks would see their vision as complementary with the secular revolutionary forces. On the one hand, this speaks to Matt Walton's point that Buddhist political thinking in Myanmar often regards democratic values not only as consistent with the Buddha's teachings, but as a worldly manifestation of the core elements of Buddhism. On the other hand, the massive lay revolutionary critique of the Sangha threatens the Buddhist coordinates of the revolutionary project. Thus, while to some it is a Buddhist revolution, to others it is not only a democratic revolution, but also a revolution of Buddhism as a necessary step to create new social orders. Thank you for your attention.